I had secret siblings living in my attic. But I wasn't allowed to talk about them.
Disclaimer: the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only.
DisastrousInvolvedI.
I wasn't allowed to talk to the boy with wings, my brother, but I wasn't permitted to call him that anymore. My mother said he was supposed to be an angel, except I knew what angels looked like, the idealized versions from movies as well as the biblically accurate ones. He was more like a crow, a hideous bird-like creature resembling the body of a male adolescent college student spliced with a diseased bird. My brother didn't even have a name. To my parents, he was like a stray cat who picked them. They didn't love him or want him in the house. On the flip side, he was also an angel, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to observe something that defied the laws of physics. With power like no other, he, like my sister, was a lost child of the sky. Those ethereal beings who had fallen thousands of years ago and decided to walk on Earth. He had saved my life as a baby. I was so young that I don't remember it, but Mom likes to remind me every year on my birthday that I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the angels in our attic, my adopted brother and sister. I was born severely premature, with only a small chance of surviving one night. Mom said she prayed endlessly, begging for a miracle, and was visited by the two beings who gave me life through their divine power. When I pulled through, Mom begged them to stay and watch over me until I was old enough to fend for myself. If I think back to my earliest memory, it's the angels babysitting and watching over me. Back then, they actually looked cherubic. Or maybe that's just how I remember them. My brother bore huge white wings, almost like a swan, while my sisters were more grayish. They used to smile and giggle, and for a while we were actual siblings, but as I grew up, I saw less of them. Mom would drag them away while we were in the middle of some shenanigans, and I wouldn't see them for days, sometimes weeks. I thought the angels had finally flown away back home. I was sad, I guess. I mean, I was just a little kid, and my older siblings had vanished, when I started hearing noises upstairs. The familiar sound of their wings scraping against wooden floorboards and the crumbling ceiling. Mom and Dad told me my siblings were now inside the attic. It was too dangerous for them, so they were safe upstairs, which meant no more playing with them, and especially, no more mentioning them to family members and friends. Mom was very strict with me. They're magical beings, Nini. She told me one night before bed, there's a lot of bad people out there who will want your brother and sister for bad things. So, we need to keep quiet about them, alright? I went to school the next day and drew a picture of the two of them playing with me. At the end of class, my teacher gently pulled me aside. "Am I in trouble?" I asked, and she laughed, gesturing for me to sit down. No, you're not in trouble. I just want to talk about the art you made during class." I shuffled on my chair, well aware of my promise to Mom. I wasn't allowed to talk about the angels in the attic. "This is a very pretty drawing, Nini," my teacher said, holding it up. "Are they angels?" I nodded excitedly. "They're my brother and sister." Her eyes darkened. She shuffled back on her chair. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, no, my siblings are alive," I said. "They're angels, and they live in the attic." I remember her smile was a little too big. She leaned forward, plucking my drawing from my hands. "Do they not have names?" "No," I told her, matter-of-factly. "They're not allowed names." Her smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean they're not allowed names, sweetie?" Mrs. J was my favorite teacher, usually, but I could already sense her growing unease. I pretended not to see her digging her nails into my drawing. I told her exactly what Mom told me, because they're angels. I said, giggling. "They don't need human names." Mrs. J nodded, handing me back my drawing. "Sweetie, I know I'm not supposed to ask this, I'll probably get in trouble, so can we keep this between you and me?" I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. Maybe I had said the wrong thing, okay. When my teacher leaned closer, her expression darkened significantly. "Let me back up a couple months. Mrs. J had been absent for a while. She used to be smiley and colorful, always excited to teach us. But she came back weeks later, distant, and somehow hollow. Her smiles were forced, and even then, sitting in front of me wearing a giant grin, I could tell my teacher was distraught. I felt guilty that my siblings were angels, and could probably heal her pain. Mom's rules would never allow that. Nini, would you be able to tell me what these angels look like?" I shrugged. Well, they have wings. No, Nini. Mrs. J stabbed at the drawing, running her index across my sister's stick-person face. I had drawn her thick red hair in a fuzzy crayon blur, and my brother's curls in a brown cloud. I never saw their halos, but I'd drawn them above their heads, anyway, along with large, feather-like wings. What do these angels look like? I was going to reply, but then Mom poked her head inside. Nini, it's time to go home, honey. She smiled at my teacher, who to my surprise, stuffed the drawing in her pocket. Mom definitely saw her attempt to hide my picture. I saw her demeanor stiffen slightly, her arms already defensively crossing over her chest. Mrs. J, is there a problem? My teacher jumped to her feet, faking her smile once again. I was just talking to Nini about her homework. Mom nodded slowly, maintaining her expression. I'm sorry about your children. She cleared her throat. They were so young. They're my babies, my teacher's voice splintered. I'm sure you understand a mother's grief. Please excuse me. I'm here if you want to talk, Mom said. We all know Adam liked to dabble with recreational drugs. Mrs. J's smile faltered, and I saw the switch from my teacher to a parent. I don't need your pity, she spat. If I'm honest with you, if I hear one more person telling me everything is going to be okay, I am going to lose my mind. Thank you, but I don't want your sorry. I don't want your condolences. Her voice broke, and I immediately wanted to give her a hug. I watched my teacher open up my laptop. Ostensibly ignoring my mother, if you're going to stand there and waste my time, I suggest you leave. Mrs. J caught my eye, her lips curling into a scowl. Mrs. J pulled out my drawing, slapping it on the desk. Your daughter has an interesting imagination. Mom's eyes widened as she took the drawing. She wrapped her hand around my wrist and gently pulled me from the room. When we were in the car on the way home, I asked why my teacher was so upset. Mom didn't reply for a long time, leaving me drowning in uncomfortable silence. I knew she had the drawing. I knew I was in trouble. I expected her to lecture me, but instead, she bought me chocolate ice cream from a drive-thru. While I was eating it, she cleared her throat. Mrs. J lost her children. Mom said, her fingers tightening around the wheel. She craves a miracle, and you gave her hope with your drawing. Mom pulled it from her pocket, and to my horror, tore it up and threw it out of the window. I watched it land in a puddle. My brother's crayon smile disappeared under the murky water. Nini, did you tell Mrs. J about your brother and sister? I didn't answer, ice cream creeping back up my throat. Nini. Mom said, again. I shook my head. No, I lied, and when she gave me the look, I caved. I just said there are angels living in the attic. Mom nodded slowly. Did you say they were real angels? No, did she ask what they look like? I wasn't a fan of the interrogation, my eyes swimming with tears. I don't know, I mumbled. No. She just liked my drawing. Mom curled her lip. You're absolutely sure, Nina? Because if you're lying, bad people will come and take your siblings. She only called me Nina when I was in trouble, yes. Mom leaned back into her seat, breathing out a sigh of relief. That's good, she whispered. I flinched when she turned to me, grasping my hands and squeezing them tight, because we can't have anyone taking them away, okay? They're your angels, sweetheart. Following that day, I wasn't allowed to even mention the angels in our attic. If I did, either intentionally or accidentally slipping up, I was promptly sent to my room. The problem was, no matter how many times I was told not to talk about them or completely ignore their existence, I refused. These two, whether angels or not, were still my brother and sister. I told my aunt about them when I was maybe 10, during Thanksgiving dinner. It was a slip of the tongue, she thought I was joking. We were all sharing our wishes for the upcoming year, so I had held up my glass of juice, copying my parents' toast, and declared, I wish I could see my brother and sister who are in the attic again. Aunt Jules spluttered on her own wine, and I caught the look she shot my mother. She already had tomato cheeks, giggling a little too much for an adult woman. Mom had already set several glasses of water in front of her, but she was ignoring all of them. Frida. She chuckled, wiggling her eyebrows. Is there anything you should tell me? Mom slowly lowered her own glass, her lips pressed to the rim. Jules, you know my daughter has an overactive imagination. They're more like imaginary friends. Aunt Jules straightened in her seat, suddenly, her smile fading. That's not what I wanted to talk about. She turned to me, color bleeding from her cheeks. "Nini, why don't you go upstairs to your room? I need to talk to your mother." "No, it's okay, I'm almost an adult too." I smiled at my aunt. "Nina, you are 8 years old." Dad grumbled, inhaling piles of mashed potato. I didn't move, staying stubbornly still. I figured if I stayed as still as possible, the adults might not notice it was past my bedtime. "Nina." Mom's tone was a warning. "Go upstairs." I reluctantly dragged myself upstairs. When I tried to listen in on the conversation, hiding on the stairs, Dad picked me up and carried me all the way up to my room and tucked me into bed. I thought I could stay awake and strain my ears to listen to the conversation, but I fell asleep. I was woken by something wet trickling down my face. Opening my eyes, I found myself staring at a single puddle of red pooling from my ceiling. I sat up, swiping my fingers down my face. Blood. When a lone feather hit my cheek, I jumped out of bed, my heart hammering. Instead of calling for my parents, I grabbed my pink chair from my dressing table and positioned it below the red stain. I hopped onto it, standing on my tiptoes and dragging my fingers across scarlet. I risked knocking 3 times. To my surprise, there was a response. 2 single knocks. "Are you okay?" I asked, pressing my face to the ceiling so they could hear my voice. Another single knock. No. Something ice cold slithered down my spine. I tried again. "Are you hurt?" "Yes." His voice was a soft sob. I jumped, almost toppling off of the chair, hearing my brother's strained voice. When I really listened, pushing all of the sound out of my head, the light hum of my bedroom light. And my parents downstairs arguing with my aunt. His cries splintered through the silence. I jumped off the chair, and almost immediately heard the sound of his movements, his wings scraping the floor. "Nini." I imagined him pressing his face against the floor. "What are you doing?" I got all the way to the door, my fingers wrapped around the ornate handle. "I'm telling Mom you're hurt," I said. "You need help." "Wait, don't." The urgency in his tone stopped me dead in my tracks. It's just a broken wing," he whispered. "I'm okay. It will heal." I didn't know what to do, so I stayed with him, balanced on my chair. For hours, I told him stories from my favorite books. And he seemed to like them. He even knew the characters' names before I said them. When I was getting sleepy, I dragged a blanket from my bed and slumped into the chair. "What's your name?" "I don't know," he said, after an uncomfortable pause. "Mom said angels don't have names." I said, "Correct." "Okay, so can I name you?" I heard the sound of him rolling onto his side. "Sure." "Simba," I declared, glancing at my stuffed lion perched on my pillows. He chuckled, and I realized I had never heard an angel laugh before. It sounded just like mine. "That's not a proper name." "Peter." I was frowning at my scrappy copy of Narnia. "Nah," he sighed. "I don't think that's me." I picked up a random book, flicking through it. "Okay, then, how about Jude?" "Jude," the angel murmured, wallowing the name around his mouth. "I like it." I nodded excitedly. "What about our sister?" "Lily." The small squeak came from the angel girl herself. "I like the name Lily." She whispered. I felt proud of finally naming them, and they started to feel more like siblings to me. I started sneaking food up to the attic. Just salted crackers at first, and holy water from my mother's fountain. But angels are hungry, and had a particular liking for snacks and junk food. Initially, I shoved the food through the cracks in the floorboards to avoid getting caught. But then I grew brave and started hauling my old Nintendo DS and an ancient game of Monopoly up there. I had to squeeze myself through a suffocating gap, after climbing up a wobbly wooden ladder and carefully removing several floodboards so I could pull myself through. Once I was through, though, eagerly holding snacks and games, my eyes adjusted to surroundings, my DS slipping through my fingers. I had never been inside the attic before. When I questioned what was inside, I was told it was for storage, except the storage room smelled of antiseptic. "Could you put the floorboards back?" Jude's shuddery voice startled me. "I'm cold." The two figures slumped against the wall sent my heart into my throat. Jude and Lily, I hadn't seen them since I was a child, since they were dragged away from me when I was playing. I had grown up with their voices bleeding through my ceiling, and imagined them much older, but they were still the same age, exactly the same age, college kids, or maybe older. Early 20s. The same angels who played with me when I was a child. The two of them were pale, gaunt in the face, almost skeletal. I always thought their wings were beautiful and swan-like, majestic, otherworldly, but this wasn't what I remembered. I could feel my breaths growing heavy, a shiver creeping down my spine. I wasn't even sure I was looking at an angel at all. Their wings were tattered and shredded, barely attached to their backs, heavy, and very clearly weighing them down. When I was a kid, I distinctly remembered my brother's wings as perfect. There was no explanation why they were there, or how. The explanation was that they were angels, and human laws didn't apply to them. However, what I was seeing did have an explanation. Jude's wings weren't beautiful, unexplained phenomenons magically sprouting from his back. In the haunting white light buzzing above me, I could see exactly where his naked spine protruded from his skin, splitting in two, where horrific feathered appendages resembling wings blossomed, spliced through a filthy t-shirt. I risked a step toward them, noticing the two of them stiffening up. Like I was going to hurt them. Mom lied. That was all I could think. She said they had blankets, food, and books. She said they were happy staying locked away in our attic. The more I had time to think, to wrap my head around what I was seeing, it hit me that this room above our house wasn't a safe place to protect our angels. The light was painful to the eyes, fluorescent and cruel. The walls and ceiling were clinical white. Clinical, but it was the angels themselves that didn't make sense. Against the backdrop of what felt and looked almost like an operating theater, my siblings looked out of place, bound in cruel chains biting their ankles and wrists, binding them to the walls themselves, to the very foundations keeping the house together. I took another step forward. Something was sticking from my sister's arm, a long plastic tube feeding into her. Closer, I glimpsed rivulets of red beating down Jude's back, another longer tube, this time filled with clear liquid, sticking directly from the incision carved where his spine split in two. I pretended not to see the metal clamp forced inside bloody slithers of flesh, his wings shuddering, individual feathers trying to contract, trying to spread wide, and folded into grotesque flaps. Lily sat awkwardly, her back to the wall, strawberry blonde hair hanging in flickering eyes. I glimpsed one single plastic tube stuck into her arm. She seemed to be in better condition, her wings easily unfurling when she shuffled back, her lips parting. Mom and Dad weren't protecting the angels from the outside, they were experimenting on them. It's okay, Jude murmured, lightly nudging the girl. It's just Nini. Lily's weary eyes found mine, half-lidded eyes struggling to stay awake. Slowly, I knelt in front of them, my eyes stinging. I pushed filthy brown hair from my brother's sleepy eyes. Before I could speak, though, he weakly gestured to the DS I dropped on the floor. His voice was a slurred mumble, and my gaze shot to the tube cruelly sticking from his spine. Does that have Mario? His question took me off guard. I shuffled back, grabbed the DS, swiping dust from the screen. I slid the power on, and his eyes lit up. No, I held it up so he could see the screen. But I do have Nintendogs. Jude grinned, though I wasn't expecting to see sharp incisors jutting from his gums. Sounds fun. He held out his chained wrists. Do you want to play? I had so many questions, but at that moment, looking at the creases in my brother's expression, while he was in pain, I swallowed my words. I played with them until the sky turned dark. When I was packing up, I couldn't resist moving towards, my heart jumping in my chest. I tried to pull the tube from his spine, and his wings jerked, his eyes widening. Don't! He snarled like an animal, and I stood, paralyzed. Jude shuffled away, his wings twitching, struggling under the clamp. His breaths came out in sharp pants, his fingernails, almost like claws, dragging across wooden boards. Don't fucking touch me! He spat. Do you understand? I didn't move, and his expression softened, his teeth retracting. I'm sorry, he said. It just hurts. I finished for him, choking on my own sob. My mom and dad are hurting you. Jude didn't reply for a moment, before his head jerked up. Do you remember that one time when you wanted to fly? You jumped off of the bunk bed, and broke your arm, and we ran for your mom? We love you, and we care about you. But we need help now, too. I nodded. Do you have a paper and pen? I did. I brought a whole coloring pad up for drawing. I nodded, handing him a blank piece of paper and a crayon. Jude scribbled a number, and handed it to me. Can you call this number? He whispered. I nodded. Why? Is it, like, part of your job? As an angel? His expression furrowed, but he replaced confusion with a smile. Yeah. It's a job. He leaned back, wincing when his wings brushed against the ceiling, visibly in pain. I've been here for so long protecting you, I need to check up on all the other children. Jude, Lily grumbled, nudging him when he rolled his eyes. Knock it off. Why? His smile was bitter. Aren't we just doing our jobs? That night, I left the attic with a mission, feeling optimistic. I was going to call the special angel number and help my brother do his job. Mom was making dinner, so it was easy to distract her. I made a huge deal about dessert, and when she was grumbling to herself, pulling ingredients for cookies from the cupboard, I swiped my mother's phone from her purse, locked myself in the bathroom, and dialed the number. I was so excited, my fingers were all clammy. The dial tone sounded in my ear, before the sound of someone picking it up. Hello? Before I could speak, Mom was unlocking the door, pulling her phone from my grasp. Nini, what are you doing? She demanded, apologizing to the recipient. Yes, hello. I'm so sorry, my daughter accidentally called you. She shot me the dagger eyes. Before walking away, her phone to her ear. No, I have no idea how she got your number. Have a great night. Mom didn't get mad. Instead, she made me cookies. I was nibbling on a chocolate one when she leaned against the counter, arms folded. Nini, I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to tell the truth. I was doing a job, I said, dipping my cookies in fondant, her eyebrows furrowed. You were doing a job? I nodded. One of the angels gave me an angel number, so I could do his job for him. Mom's lip curled. Okay, then, can I have the angel number? When I hesitated, she sighed. Nini, I'm sure he would rather an adult was doing his job for him. She held out her hand. Sweetie, I don't want to ask you again. I handed it over, words suddenly choking from my mouth. Why are you hurting them? Mom looked taken aback, her eyes widening. Nini, why on earth would you think we are hurting them? I saw them, I said, my voice breaking. You're doing bad things to their wings. Mom hugged me, and I found myself splintering apart, burying my head in her chest. Nina, sweetie, you are very, very wrong, she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. They're sick, Mom murmured into my shoulder, running her fingers through my hair. When they brought you back to life as a child, they were so weak, so they couldn't fly away. We didn't tell you because we didn't want to scare you. I nodded, squeezing my mother to my chest. It all made sense. They were fixing their wings, your father and I have been trying to save them, she hummed. Of course, with them being so powerful, we have no choice but to take extra measures, which, yes, include chaining them up. She pulled away from the hug, wiping away my tears. Nina, you need to understand that they are extraordinarily powerful, and only chains soaked in holy water will hold them. When they were younger, they were weaker and less destructive. But, as you saw, they are growing stronger every day. I felt a pang in my chest, then they'll fly away. I whispered. Mom pursed her lips, but nodded, giving me another cookie. Then they'll fly away. I didn't visit the angels for a while after that. I think part of me was scared of them, scared of their destructive power, but then I missed them. So, I grabbed snacks from the kitchen, a handful of DS games I knew Jude would like, and crept out of my room, making a beeline towards the attic. Except when I climbed the wobbly stairs, the loose floorboards leading to the attic had all been replaced. I had an idea to tell them by knocking on my ceiling. But when I came home from school, running up to my room, my bedroom was out of bounds. We're redecorating, Mom smiled brightly. For now, you'll be sleeping in our room. I had no way to contact them. When my room was finished, I had a brand new ceiling. I knocked all night, balancing on my chair, waiting for a response. I never got one. I did hear them, though, in the middle of the night. Their pain screams bled through my walls, keeping me awake. I saw their blood seeping through the walls, the ceiling, stray feathers choking the air, as if our house felt their agony. When I slipped out of bed, I stepped on tattered pieces of their wings pricking my bare feet. I ran the faucet to wash my face, but instead, blood ran thick, staining porcelain. They must have been sick enough to almost feel human. I heard their wails, their pleads for death, and half wondered if they were asking their father. God, Mom told me over breakfast that the angels were deathly ill. She told me to pray for them, and I did, bent over my frosted flakes. I prayed their father would hear them, and save them, like they saved me. Eventually, their cries stopped, Dad said they were finally stable, and my mother broke down in tears. When I hit my tweens, then my teens, I forgot about them. I was still aware of the sick angels in my attic, but being a teenager, I guess I was more interested in experimenting with my sexuality and spending time with friends. But that didn't mean they didn't exist. When I was 18, I left for college, but I still visited for the holidays. I finally saw them again. It was hard to ignore the boy with tattered white wings jutting out from his spine and the slit in his shirt as he dragged himself downstairs, sneaking into our refrigerator. I wasn't sure what this version of Jude was. He was different from the one I met in the attic. That boy still resembled a human, still felt pain. This guy had talon-like fingernails and a twisted spine protruding from his back, making him appear more bird-like. But his wings were bigger, his spine hidden by a blood-drenched shirt clinging to him. He was always hunched over, moving slowly, his once human features obscured by thick, dark hair covering his eyes. I tried to ignore the grime stuck between his toes and the scarlet trail from the refrigerator to the door. He didn't even acknowledge me, sticking his face directly into a frosted cake my mother made. I watched, mesmerized, and maybe a little disgusted, as he chewed through the cake, whipped his head up, swallowing it down, exactly the way I'd see a crow eating bread. When his eyes did find me, they were beady and wrong, almost vacant. He ignored me, standing on his tiptoes to sniff around in the cupboard. Jude. I found myself saying his name, and it felt and sounded foreign. He didn't respond, ripping open a bag of candy bars. He was ravaging a Snickers bar when I turned to him, swallowing down bile. Jude's sickness really had turned him from an angel into something else. His body was more of a grotesque contortion of angel and human. His bones jutted out in weird places, his wings a lot better and sturdier, but much sharper. Every individual is sharp as a needlepoint. How old are you? I asked, casually. I'm almost 19, and you've been 19 for most of my life, but you're also an angel, so that would make you, like, old. It was a joke. I was hoping he'd retained his humor from when I was a kid. I remembered telling him a joke, and he actually laughed, like a real, proper laugh. Jude. I said, again. He twisted around, chocolate slew dropping down his chin. It hit me when he slowly inclined his head, beady eyes twitching. He couldn't understand me, or at least, he was struggling to fully understand me. I noticed his eyes were glued to my lips. He was reading my words. I stood up slowly. Mom and Dad were at the store, so I didn't have much time. If you have wings, why don't you fly away? Jude dragged his twitching body to the door, his arms full of snacks. I didn't expecting him to laugh, one arm whipping out, curled nails gripping the doorway, the other grasping salted chips. His laugh was strange, no longer human, more of a bird-like squawk. Instead of speaking, he saluted me with his candy bar and walked away, still chirping to himself. 2 weeks later, I got a glimpse of Lily. Her wings were larger than her, monstrous gray appendages splitting her spine in two. Lily's clothes were barely clinging to her skeletal frame. She was hunched over, a single chain wrapped around her ankle. She went straight to the kitchen faucet and turned on the stream of water, gulping greedily, her fawn-like teeth piercing silver. When she dropped to her knees, weighed down by her wings, I couldn't stand it anymore. I shoved the door open to the patio. Go, I managed to choke out, pointing outside. Fly. I won't tell Mom. I saw her longing to be free, desperation crumpling her attempt at a smile. She nodded, making a beeline for the door. Her wings weren't strong enough, so I grabbed duct tape and reinforced them as much as I could. I pulled off my jacket and threw it over her shoulders, pulling her into a hug. She didn't speak. I don't think she could. Her neck was narrower, more bird-like. I wasn't even sure if she had vocal cords anymore. Go. I said, halfway to the door, I'll go get your brother. With a broken smile, she stepped over the threshold. She was so close to cold air on her skin, sunlight reflecting in wide, hopeful eyes filled with tears. I watched her spread her wings, flying up. There was a knock on the front door, and I panicked, shutting the door. Go. I hissed, hello? Footsteps. They weren't my mother, Frida. The kitchen door flew open, an all too familiar face, followed by a pained shriek. Serena? It took me half a second to realize my old elementary school teacher was standing in the doorway, her frenzied eyes glued to Lily. I watched her take slow steps forward, stumbling, her hands covering her mouth. Serena, she sobbed, oh, God, my baby. Her lips started to curl, and I felt her scream rooted inside my skull, her gaze locked onto the girl's wings. What did they do to you? What did they do? Bang, in the time it took for the angel to drop to the ground, and her mother following suit, reality slammed into me in an icy wave. Lily hit the patio, scarlet spreading around her. She wasn't an angel, Nina. Mom was in the doorway, a shotgun in her hands. Next to her, Jude stood, his eyes wild, his mouth gagged by my mother's hand. "Mom?" Jude muffled, his gaze found my teacher crumpled on the floor, his expression contorting, growing feral. He lunged forward, his bird-like cry becoming more human, resembling a child's screech. Mom yanked him back, slamming her hand over his mouth. "Mom." I watched, paralyzed, as she turned on him, sticking the gun between his brows. "Stay," she spat, running the barrel of the gun down his naked back. Mom saw his sharp glance towards freedom, forcing him into his knees. "Move, and I shoot her." She twisted back to Lily, who wasn't moving. He dropped to his knees, slowly raising his hands. "Okay," my mother gasped out. "So, I want to get several things very fucking clear." In 2 strides, she was looming over my elementary school teacher. I watched her stick the barrel of the gun, protruding it into the woman's head, and blowing her brains out all over our kitchen floor, seeping scarlet and fleshy pink chunks decorating my shoes. The angels didn't react, Lily lying in her own blood, and Jude staring, dead-eyed, at his mother. I couldn't breathe. I was aware I had thrown up all over myself, but I didn't remember moving, only the thick acidic sludge dripping down my face. "You don't have a mother," Mom spat at Jude. "You are a fallen angel who dropped from the skies thousands of years ago and now walks the earth." I watched her cradle the boy's face. "You saved my daughter. You were my perfect miracle." Mom's eyes were manic, her smile widening. She tightened her grip, forcing him to look at her. "Aren't you?" He didn't reply, his lip curling. Mom laughed in his face. "Adam, you were your mother's worst enemy," she said, spite dripping from every word. "Do you know how much it upset her to see her own son hurting himself right in front of her?" Her gaze flashed to Lily. "Serena was a whore of a woman," she spat. "Every day, I watched and listened to your mother complain about the 2 of you. You stole cash for drugs, sold her car, and even used her medication to satisfy your disgusting, filthy habit. Serena was sleeping around. And your own father called you a disgrace. Honestly, Adam, I should have left you in that hotel room." She gripped harder, her manicured nails slicing into his skin, unconscious, drooling, a needle sticking from your veins. "How fucking pathetic." He cried out, sharp, more akin to a crow, trying to jerk from her unyielding grasp. "I should have let you destroy your body, let your mother find you unresponsive again." Mom stepped back, admiring him. "I gave you wings to save you," she whispered. Dad came through the door, already hauling bleach and a body bag. Mom must have known my teacher was planning to visit. I think this was the point where I was supposed to do something. But I was frozen, standing in pooling blood and splintered pieces of my teacher's skull. Dad hauled the angels back to the attic, and I was left with my mother. "Grab me a bucket," she said, like disposing of a body was normal. I didn't speak to my mother. Instead, I grabbed my backpack and left the house. I went straight to the sheriff's office and told him directly that I had witnessed a murder and that 2 missing college students were in my parents' attic. I don't think they believed me at first. I shouldn't have led with, "I think my mother turned 2 missing college kids into angels." Officially, Adam and Serena would be 39 years old. I wasn't looking forward to trying to explain how the 2 of them resembled teenagers.
I think I just beat him.
Still, I sat in the back of the police cruiser, following a dozen cops to my house, which was empty. Mom and Dad were gone, and when the cops broke through into the attic, it was just storage space. The angels were nowhere to be seen. It didn't take the cops long to start pointing the finger at me. I was hauled back to the station, and after I was interrogated and then lectured on wasting police time, I was released. With no choice but to go home, I began my search. Jude and Lily had to be somewhere, hidden away. I couldn't imagine my parents running away with 2 genetically engineered angels. I started in the attic, where all I could find were old boxes, ancient toys, and a DS. Mom and Dad were good at covering their tracks. Moving to my parents' room, there was nothing of importance until I crawled under their bed. There was nothing under there, but there was a lump in the carpet. Another loose floorboard. This one led me into a shallow hole filled with documents. Spreading them across the floor, I found Adam and Serena's names. Mom and Dad were documenting their progress. Day 1, subjects are calm. Neuromuscular blockers administered. I am going to attempt to make an incision into the spine of the S1. I will update with progress. So far, everything looks good. There was 19 years worth of research and procedures, but they didn't stop after Adam and Serena. I found old files from years ago, back when they were babies, names that kept going: Nathan, Lily, Charlotte, Matthew, Jesse, Eve, Victor, Evangeline. Something sickly crept its way up my throat. If my parents had been experimenting on all of those people, where were they now? I got my answer. When I dug deeper into the old subjects, failed was stamped. A sea of red, reaching further into the shallow cavern, my fingers brushed something warm, something wet and soft, almost like feathers. I retracted back, and as if it was alive, as if it could feel, the ground rumbled beneath me, and I heard that soft cry once more, that wail. I couldn't stop myself. I jumped up, tearing at the walls of my parents' room, and stepping back, when paint became slick and wet bloody feathers stuck to my palms. When a single eye blinked back at me, I stumbled back, my heart in my mouth. Mom was right. She was wrong. She fucking lied about almost everything. Jude and Lily were not angels. They did not save me when I was a baby. Jude and Lily are my parents' successful attempt to replace what is living inside our walls. The angel my house was built on, its bones made from its foundations, its blood splattered across our walls. I think it's upset. I think it wants its children, all of its children from past and present, back. It's already started to cry. The walls are bleeding. Its ceiling is crumbling. Floors caving in. The angel whispers in my ear, a language that twists and contorts my thoughts. This thing is threatening me. If I don't bring back its children, it's going to kill me. But I can't help wondering if it's trying to tell me something. Are those that failed still inside our house? I'm updating this post before I post the whole thing. Last night I couldn't sleep. I'd been in agonizing pain for hours. Lightning bolts are running up and down my fucking spine. I stuck my hand under my shirt to relieve the tension, only to pluck a single feather quill from my body. What my parents did to Jude, Lily, and all those kids. Am I their next subject?
Until next time, subscribe to stay up to date with all updates. No screamers or shocking moments, only comfort and safety. Bye.